Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery. Apologize in advance for the long gap in between videos. If you don't know me personally, and if you haven't seen some of the Instagram posts, some of the things that I've talked about, I also own a real estate business as well. And recently I made the switch over from one company to another. And because of that, I've had a month of transition and switching things around and really just pounding the ground trying to get the new business going with the new company. So with that being said, I'm gonna start trying to schedule in some video time, get some consistent videos out again. I should be able to going forward. There's still gonna be some times it's summer, it's busy, I'm gonna have some gaps, and I do apologize for that, but I'm gonna try to get out as many as I can. Maybe even film multiple ones if I can some weeks, and either make up for lost ones or have them set up for weeks that I can't do them, right? Today's video, I'm gonna be talking about shot execution, and I'm gonna be talking about one specific style of shot execution. It's what I'm using, it's what is working the best for me most consistently, whether I'm shooting every day or whether it's like it's been lately and I'm shooting maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. This shot execution is very simple, as the best ones are, and you can break down your front half from your back half in order to stabilize your shot and then keep it stable with what you're doing through execution with what I'm going to tell you today. So as I mentioned in the intro, shot execution, to be effective and to be consistent one after the other, needs to be simple. All the best ones are. If you are combining a lot of different movements or working off of a certain feel or movement in the hand or the thumb or the finger if you're using a trigger or whatever that may be, that consistency from one day to the next can change and vary. Maybe you haven't been shooting enough lately and the feel of whatever you're doing has gone away. Maybe one day you're just different. I mean, your muscles react differently. What you've eaten has made your body react differently, something along those lines. So that can change what you're doing. So in order to lessen the effect of what our bodies do when they vary day to day and what we do as we vary day to day, we need to develop that simple shot execution. For me, I went back to it and looked at it as, let's break this down to the core of archery, what it's always been, and then how can I, make that work with my bow. For me, I looked at recurves. So with a recurve bow, you're pulling the string back to the face and you're pulling in and you expand a little bit out while you're getting to the click. Now, while you're doing that, you have to continually be steady, because once you do hit that click, you're supposed to let go of the string, and that's what allows you to have more consistency. So whenever that clicker does go off. If you're not familiar with recurves, a clicker on a recurve is a device, a piece of metal that runs down, and it runs in the front of the riser. So I'll mimic what I can show you with my compound bow and let you try to get a decent idea of what I'm talking about. But what you would be looking at here is there would be a piece of metal that would run down right here, and it would set at an angle. And when that arrow is on there, it would wait for the arrow to go back. And then once that arrow passes behind it, it would then be allowed to move. And basically it clicks against the riser. That's the clicker noise that you would hear. That signifies that you have pulled the string back to the same spot each time, that arrow coming off the clicker itself and getting to your drawing where you're going to be holding best and where you're wanting to release that arrow at. For us with the compound, a lot of that is already developed for us. We have stops on our cams. So we pull into those stops and there's a little bit of give. Depending on the bow, there's more, there's less. If you have limb stops, you don't always have a whole lot unless you have a spongier limb stop, then you can. But it's the same concept. We want to be able to release within that window of hitting the stops and not having to pull too far or creeping forward off the stops, right? So incorporating that with a compound, you can do the same thing. You can continually feel like you're pulling back on that string until the shot fires and the release breaks. Now for me, I prefer to use a hinge. So I've got a true ball fulcrum flex here. I shoot it as a 2-finger. I use my 2-finger attachment on it. It's just kind of how I prefer to have it set up. I use a clicker on this release. Now, I don't use the clicker on this release like a recurve clicker, and I've had some recent discussions with some other archers that have messaged me or emailed me and asked me these, so I'm gonna go over it real fast. A clicker on a hinge is not pulling through the shot, click, knowing it's about to happen, bam. A clicker on a hinge release is a setup position. So whether you're rolling through the release and settling tension on it at anchor and getting to the click, whether you're pulling back, letting off the thumb peg and that gets you to the click, or you're pulling back, letting off the thumb peg and then expanding and pulling the elbow back around behind you a little bit more and getting into line and it clicks. One of those methods works best for me and most of the archers that I've worked with coaching wise and talked to. That's how you use a click. From there, then you actually start the shot execution and your shot itself. You would start your aiming, you would start maintaining a steadier float and then pulling through. So that's what I would recommend and what I would do on there. So for me, again, there's two different parts of the shot execution. Like I mentioned in the intro, there's gonna be the front half and the back half. Let's talk about the front half really quick. All right, so when we're talking about our front half, what's it for? Well, it's for stability, right? The way that we derive the stability from what we're doing with our system is setting the correct draw length and using the correct form. Now, there's baselines for form and draw length, but then you also need to adapt your form and your draw length on the bow to what works best for you, your shot style, and what you're seeing on target. For me personally, I prefer being able to lift my arm straight up from my side. This is a natural place for me. It's easy for me to set my bows back up to this setup, and this is also where I hold steadiest on target. Even just holding my arm up like this right now, I can hold the bow pretty steady without drawing it back, without creating tension in my body. Now, the reason that works for me is because the shoulder joint is naturally allowing itself to seat, and it sits above my hips and above my core. My core is going to help stabilize it and help hold me up. My bow hand stays at the level or just slightly above the height of my shoulder. That transfers the weight, the balance of the weight back into my body. Again, my core and my body is helping support and hold that weight. For me, that works really well. Also, the reason I like this setup here is because as I'm anchoring and working through my shot, I'm wanting that shoulder to seat in place and actually steady my shot. I see less movement on target. For me, when I see less movement on target, it's easier to execute, it's easier to shoot consistently. So I have worked and adapted my shot to slightly shorten a draw length that may be perfect for other coaches and other archers that they're teaching and using to work for me. So for instance, on this bow, I'm just over 28.5 inch on my draw length. That's AMO, so that's pivot of the bow to string at full draw plus 1 1/75 inch, or 1.75 inches, 1 3/4, right? That for me holds best. So I'm just over, I think I'm a 32nd, 16th over, I don't remember for sure, but somewhere in that area. However, I can almost get to 29, so I'm really closer to the 3/4 inch mark in that 28 range for a perfect draw length. That extra 1/4 inch, being able to pull it back into my body, again, allows me to set up and hold steadier. That's what I look at on my arm. As far as when I'm shooting, I'm actually trying to activate certain muscles in the bow arm side in order to stabilize my body. I almost dropped my bow. That would have been a good blooper if I'd had the camera back, right? I need 2 cameras. Let me keep doing these videos. The Patreon channel, that's gonna be more active. I'll get more money on it that way to be able to put back into my channel, hopefully, and I'll get another one of these and maybe set it up on the side for stuff like that. Different angles, different shot stuff. That'd be cool, right? Anyways, the muscles that I'm using whenever I'm drawing back, whenever I'm trying to steady myself, is the shoulder muscles here around the joint. Those are big. It's not over flexing and over tightening them necessarily, because if you over flex and over tighten, just like you ball up your fist, you shake a little bit. So you don't want to do that, but you want them engaged. You want to be able to work a little bit. I have a relaxed elbow position to begin with, but then I'm allowing it to soak up vibration and movement in what I'm doing on the target. And of course, try to keep my release hand as relaxed as possible. But I have actually found, for me, a little bit of tension in it is better. If I don't get as much tension or any tension at all, if it's completely loose and completely just there, I do see a little bit more wobble side to side on my sight pin, especially if the wind is blowing. So I try to get just a tiny amount, not a lot. The way that I do my grip and the way that I'm setting up on the bow, it doesn't make me torque the bow, but I have built that into my shot because there again, DAPS works better for me, right? As far as the core, everything else, just make sure you have good form, good T form. head over, the center of your body. You don't want to be leaning too far back or too far forward on flat shots, because that's going to take you and force you to use more of your shoulder and not your core to support that shoulder. All right, so the second part of this is the release side. And obviously that's the portion of this video that I really wanted to talk about and dive into what I'm doing, because it's incredibly simplistic. And every time I tell somebody what I'm doing with this, they just go, "Really? That's it?" "Yeah, that's it. Try it." And then they go and try it and it works. And then they look back at me and they're like, "Holy cow, that's really stupidly easy. Why am I overcomplicating things? And why haven't I done this before?" This works with any type of release you're ever going to pick up. It works with a hinge release, it works with a thumb release, it works with an index finger release, and it works with a resistance style release. You never have to change the way that you're shooting. You never have to change the style that you're shooting, and you don't have to adapt to do different things per release. So you stay completely consistent across the board, which for an archer is huge, because you never have to worry about wanting to use a different release and totally changing everything. You can just pick one up, go to the next one, you're fine. Find out what works best for you and your shot, maybe what works best for you that day, and go for it. I switch back and forth between thumb and hinge a lot. I seem to always gravitate back towards the hinge no matter what, but it does help me to have some options, right? So to make this work with all those releases, you have to set the release up correctly. On a hinge, that means setting up the rotation that's needed on it to allow you to be able to not fully engage the outer fingers, whichever one you're using, whether it's just your middle finger, your middle and third, or even that pinky finger, or just one of them. You want to be slightly engaged so that it's there, but as you're continually pulling back, you want to be able to have that increase and come through. Also with the hinge, you want to make sure that you're not too tense on the index finger. You want to make sure that it's straight, it's flat, it's working for you, it's not balled up or anything, because that will allow you to be able to let the release rotate through off that index. For a thumb release, it's a little bit different how you set up your finger tension. You might want to play with this, see what works best for you. For me personally, I am still similar to what I do with my hinge. I set up with a straight index where it's here, it's wrapped around, it's looped. Slight tension on the middle finger as I get to anchor, and slight tension on the thumb. That's important on a thumb release for me, setting up the thumb release to have enough tension that you can set your thumb on it without it firing. And then from there, you adjust that tension or the speed on a hinge or the resistance on a resistance release, all the same, to get your shot window down. Now, that's a video that I've done in the past. I believe it's Tuesday's Tip of the Week number 6, I believe. You can scroll back through, look through the videos, you can find it and be able to watch that to see how to set up your timing, see the camera looking through my scope to go over that timing and what you're looking for. As you're going through a resistance release, I hold all my tension maybe a little bit more neutral than what I do on my hinge and my thumb, but more than likely still about the same, because that's just what I'm used to doing. And on an index release, it's being able to put that finger on the index release. I don't always prefer the tip of the finger. Sometimes I like to put it in this first little crease on the trigger, depending on what type of trigger it is, but that's something to play with. You don't want to have it, most archers don't want to have it on the tip of their finger with their finger outstretched, because you can get jumpy with it. So we want to avoid that, or any type of target panic that could come from that. Now, from that point, what you're doing is visualizing in your brain, just like a recurve archer does, that you're continually trying to pull the string back with whatever fingers that are on the release that you're using. For me, with 2-finger release, I get on here and I just visually start trying to pull the string back with both 2 fingers. Whether it's a thumb release, if that's what I'm using, I'm visually trying to mentally and visually try to pull it back with my thumb, my index, and my middle finger. And I'm not pulling on it, I'm not stamping at the button, I'm not rotating the release actively. It's just continual pull with that pressure in mind, because that pressure being added into it with what you've preloaded into it to begin with will allow you to fire that release. Super simple, super easy to do, super easy to repeat day to day, like I said. I'll set up here, I'm gonna shoot one shot into the paper and let you see it. You're not gonna see a lot of movement on my hand. And the thing that you wanna focus on is not overpowering your bow and your bow arm side. You wanna be steady as you're pulling, but you want to look at what you're doing with your float, and you're not wanting to pull too fast or too hard to start worsening your float. You just want to maintain a steady pull as you're pulling through, and visualize pulling that string back mentally in your head, and just do it slowly and maintain the good sight picture. And then for me, it helps me finish over the top of my shoulder. That part for me is incredibly consistent, and that's what makes my shots good. If I can finish here versus down or up or fling my hand up or do anything different, my shots are 100% consistent from one to the next. It makes for great execution. Now, the last thing I want to go over in regards to shot execution is your fitness. I'm not going to go super in depth with this. If this is a video you would like to see, comment down below and give me a thumbs up on this video. Let me know that you want to see it. That's something that I can put together in the future if there's enough popularity in the idea of being able to see what I'm doing in order to get my fitness and my heart rate better. For shot execution, for shooting our bows, the best thing that we can do is to achieve a lower resting heart rate. That means that you're in better physical shape, and it means that your sight pin movement will be lower. If you're completely relaxed and you're calm, your sight pin movement is going to be great. But as we get nervous when we're at a shoot, or if we're shooting at an animal, or whatever the situation may be, our heart rate spikes. Our body's natural resting heart rate, when it's lower, because our heart, being a muscle, is in better physical condition, that spike in our adrenaline and what we're doing, our heart and our body will handle it better. That means that the actual heart rate that we're seeing will be a little lower, even when we're nervous and it's spiking. That means less movement on target, and it also means that our brains will be a little bit more clear as well, because you're not fully reaching a fight or flight response in an extreme nervous situation. That's when things can go a little bit haywire, right? So that's one thing that you need to look into. Obviously be safe about this. Make sure whatever you're doing is adjustable for what you need to be doing. Start slow and then work your way into whatever you're doing, especially if you're not someone that is actively working out, or it's been a while, or who knows what it is, right? Everybody's physical condition is different. Me personally, I adjust my workout for what's best for me, for my blood sugar levels. And I adapt that based off of what other people do, but it's what works best for me, right? That's what I would recommend. I mean, as far as shot execution, again, it's incredibly simple. There's a lot of things you can do with it to play with it as you're working on it, fine-tuning on the bow, the equipment, yourself, your mental state, what you're doing downrange. All that will play a huge role in it. This week's Patreon video, the Tier 1, Tier 2, it's probably all going to be the same this week, because I don't have time to film 2 different videos for Patreon, but it will be a sneak peek into what I'm doing specifically to change my stabilizer setup to make the bow aim a little bit better. It's going to be an insight on what I do to fine tune it and what I'm looking for and adjusting and adapting to get what I need. But that'll be this week's Patreon video. If you're not a subscriber, I'll put a link down below. Again, the content on there hasn't been great, but I'm going to change that. And I do appreciate everybody that has stayed along in order to see some future videos on there. Thank y'all. I appreciate you watching this video today. I hope everybody is shooting straight and has a good week, great weekend. I'll see you soon.